Good evening, everybody. It's a Wednesday, right? So I just experienced something that once I was finished with it, I thought I really need to share this because I think this is a key thing when you're dealing with an Adventist, okay? Because I'm going to say this right now. I don't mean this to come off as insulting, even though I'm sure that it is insulting. That's not my intent. Because remember, I was born and raised an Adventist, all right? And this is it. You ready? Here it is. Adventists seem to forget that the Bible is written in English today, but that is not the language that it was originally written in. And they'll tell you that. I know that it was in Greek, and it was in Aramaic, and it was in Hebrew. They'll tell you that. But yet when they make their arguments, it would appear that they have forgotten all of that. The reason for this video is because of my previous video when I talked about why Adventists really need to basically read the book of Galatians. In there, I talked about a conversation that I'd had with an existing Adventist, and I was stressing the point about in Revelation 14:12, how it says that, and these are the saints, those that basically keep the commandments of God. And I pointed out that in that verse, the word that he is using there is entole. So the word commandments is entole, and not the word nomos, which is commonly used to describe, quote unquote, the Mosaic law. So I posted the video. You guys were very kind in your comments, lots of views, so that's awesome. But then this viewer by the name of BDB 1978 began reaching out to me. And what BDB started pushing back on was when I'm saying the word entole is about laws and commands, he was pointing out that, well, what you need to remember is, and I'm paraphrasing, that these verses, that term entole, if we go back to Jesus, Jesus often referred to the 10 Commandments as entole. And there's some truth in what is being said there. If you go to Matthew, you'll find that Matthew, when he is reciting the gospel, when Jesus said, when the young Pharisee said, what is the most important commandment? He said to him, you shall not commit murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal. And he did this. And he and I, if you read the comments, of those of that video, that Galatians video, the Galatians video number 1, you can read the whole back and forth. It's all there. Okay. And I got to a point, as I'm sure you've gotten to a point with Adventists, where, you can only bang your head against the wall so many times. And then you're like, all right, I'm done. And so I had basically made an argument that I've made many, many times, and I continue to make it. And that is, it is utter nonsense to believe that the commandment, thou shalt not commit murder, was only for the first time on earth ever voiced on Mount Sinai. Utter and complete nonsense. Okay? We can go back into Genesis. We can read the covenant made with Adam, the covenant made with Noah, the covenant made with Abraham, and we can see that there were absolutely laws and commands that God gave the patriarchs. No one in their right mind would ever argue that. And my point would be, prior to Mount Sinai, there were already laws and commands in place. One law that I continue to reject is that you cannot prove to me that anyone prior to Exodus 16 was ever commanded to keep a Sabbath, nor can you prove anyone ever kept the Sabbath prior to that. I'd love to tell you someday about a conversation I had with my uncle who tried to tell me, well, God himself was keeping the Sabbath in the Garden of Eden. So he was keeping it. And and the question that would automatically come back to a person who says that, okay, tell me, what does it look like when God is keeping the Sabbath? It's the most ridiculous argument ever. Like, what does God look like on the Sabbath? Truth is, no one really knows, because the Sabbath, the rest that God did was pretty short lived. Because as soon as Adam and Eve sinned, guess what? God went back to work. That Sabbath, that rest that he was in, it stopped. But anyhow, here's the point. I'm going to try to stay on task here. My point is that there were laws and there were commands prior to Mount Sinai. Okay. But this gentleman wanted to point out that the term entole, that generally means laws and commandments, were sometimes pointed towards the actual 10 commandments. So this was my response. And I'm basically just going to read you how I responded to him. So I hope you can read it if you'd like, but this is kind of what I said. This is really where I went crazy, because this is it. I responded, BDB 1978. This is where I believe you're incorrect. When he says all verses translate entole in English are commandments every time. And he says the difference being when the man asked Jesus which commandments, Jesus quoted the 10 commandments. So they said, which is the most important commandment, or which commandment must I do to live? And he said, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal. And the guy said, I've done all those. Okay. And he said, this man says, he's using the word entole there. Matthew is, and that is pointing to the 10 commandments. And this is where I said, I strongly disagree with you. So this is what I said. I strongly disagree that he's quoting the 10 commandments when he lists these. Why do I conclude that? There are two reasons I give. I wonder if I actually gave the second. I don't think I did. These laws and commandments were given to the patriarchs centuries before the 10 commandments, i.e., and now I break it down like this. When we hear the commandment, you shall not murder, guess what? When I go to Genesis 9, verses 5 and 6, it says, to Noah, God is saying to Noah, and for your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. From every beast, I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man, I will require a reckoning for the life of the man. Quote, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. In other words, if a man kills another man, if an animal kills a man, that beast has to be killed and that man has to be killed. You are not to murder. The murder commandment did not just start in Exodus. It was here even in Genesis chapter 9. He says, you shall not commit adultery. And he says that when Jesus is saying that, he's quoting the 10 commandments, as if the commandment not to commit adultery was only stated in Exodus. Nonsense. Genesis 39:9. This is after Potiphar's wife has said to Joseph, lie with me. What's his response? How can I do this wickedness and sin against God? So my response is, it would seem that Joseph knew of a quote unquote commandment not to commit adultery. Now, I can't find explicitly in the Bible there where he said to Abraham or to Noah or to Adam, don't commit adultery, but clearly he was aware of something. Maybe it was, whether it was spoken or it was internal, he knew that to sleep with another man's wife would be committing a sin against God. So I cannot say that the prohibition against adultery started in Exodus. Clearly it was before. Now, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you will honor your mother and father. Those are the next three that Jesus mentions. Now, those three, again, I can't find explicitly where he told Adam, Abraham, or Noah those things. But what I say to you is, I think that we could see anywhere in history that societies operate best when these rules or commandments are in place. Not to steal, not to lie. And I don't know if that's a lie or if that's perjury. Either way, both are bad. And honoring your parents. So again, you can't convince me in a normal thinking person's mind that, oh, no, 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 no. These only started, these were never thought of. Like, and it's ridiculous to even utter it. But here's where this guy's argument really falls through when he says these are the 10 commandments. Because the last one that Jesus mentions here is love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? He says, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't bear false witness, don't honor your mother. And then he says, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, hold on a second. You're telling me he's quoting the 10 commandments. That's not in the 10 commandments. Furthermore, that last one, that's truly the fly in the ointment, because if the argument is that he's quoting the 10 commandments, this one doesn't appear there. Okay? And in fact, let's look closely at that. That commandment comes from Matthew 22:37, when Jesus was asked, what is the most important, or what is the greatest commandment? And he said, quote, he said unto him, ye shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But then here's the real kicker to this argument that's the 10 commandments. Here's the real kicker. He says, on these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets. Or the other versions, as I've grown up, saying all the law and the prophets hang on these 2. I have a Breakfast Club framed poster back here. Let me ask you a question. Which happened first? I put the nail in the wall, or did I put this up against the wall without it? No, come on. This cannot hang on something unless something else exists before it. The point is, before the 10 commandments came into existence, the commandments of loving God and loving your neighbors yourself, those existed before. And therefore, the 10 commandments and all the law and all the prophets ultimately hang on, they depend on those 2 things. The point is this: I have no problem with a person if they want to say the 10 commandments can be referred to as Entole. But as long as we understand the word nomos is predominantly pointing to the Mosaic law. So if you want to, so my argument to this person is, for those quote unquote 10 commandments that you're calling them, to call those Entole, I have no problem with that, because my point is they were laws, they were commandments, they existed before the 10 commandments were given. So, but then this is what I brought up to this guy, because all of a sudden this thought came into my mind, and this was the thought: who wrote the book of Revelation? John. Who wrote the Gospel of John? John. Who wrote, John 1, 2, and 3? John. Well, okay. So instead of comparing how other authors are using the terms Entole and Nomos, let's take a look for just a couple moments. How did John use the terms? Because that's really what's important. If I want to know when John wrote in Revelation 14:12 or 12:14, whichever it is, that they will keep the commandments, and he used the word Entole there, how did John use that term Entole? How did he use the word nomos? So here's what I did. I said, here's my question for you. If John believed that the Christian church that would be in existence at the time prophesied in Revelation 14:12, that they would be keeping the Mosaic law, if I said that they would be keeping the Mosaic law, why didn't he use the term nomos? And the answer is because in the Gospel of John, he used that term. Right. Hold on. Why didn't he use nomos? Right. Because in the gospel, so here we go. So I went to the Gospel of John and I looked at every example of when he used the word nomos. And my argument is the word nomos points to the Mosaic law. Watch. And this is every example in the Gospel of John where he used the word nomos. So listen to me. John 1:17, for the law, nomos, was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. So his first example here. And so what I'm going to tell you is the term nomos can be used for Mosaic law, or it can also be used for all of the Old Testament, like the prophetic writing. So when the prophets showed up and they gave new laws, all of that, it could be either. It could be 10 Commandments, Mosaic law, or the other. The context matters. So he's saying here, for the law, nomos was given by Moses. That's clearly the Mosaic law. John 1:45. Philip findeth Nathanael and saith unto him, we have found him of whom Moses in the law, nomos, and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, son of Joseph. Now, that again would tell me, because it's saying of whom Moses in the law, nomos, and the prophets, this would point me to believe that this verse, John 1:45, is pointing to both, perhaps the Mosaic law, since it's Moses, and the other prophetic writers. Okay, so it's all Old Testament. John 7:19, did Moses give you the law? Nomos. And yet none of you keepeth the law. Why go about to kill me? Clearly he's using the word nomos there to point to Mosaic law. John 7:23, if a man on the Sabbath day receive circumcision, that the law, nomos, the law of Moses, should not be broken. Are you angry at me because I've made a man whole? That's clearly equating Mosaic law to nomos. John 7:49. But this people who knoweth not the law, nomos, are cursed. Now that's John 7:49. This is when they sent Pharisees out to spy on Jesus. They came back and they're like, well, we're kind of torn. Some people really liked what he was saying. Some people didn't. And they said, what's wrong with you that you're doing this? But these people that are going, these people that don't even know the law, that are already cursed, that's clearly then not 10 Commandment law, but that's more of like the Old Testament prophet law. John 8:5. Now Moses in the law, nomos, commanded that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? Clearly Mosaic law. John 8:17, it is also written in your law, nomos, that the testimony of two men is true. Jesus answered them, is it not written in your law, nomos, I said ye are gods? That's Old Testament prophets, probably like Proverbs or the Psalms even. John 12:34, the people answered him, we have heard out of the law, nomos, that Christ abideth forever. And how sayest thou, the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is the Son of Man? That's Old Testament. That's probably Daniel, but still it was using the word nomos. John 15:5, but this cometh to pass that the old word might be fulfilled that is written in their law, nomos, they hated me without cause. Old Testament, clearly. John 8, there's only two more. John 18:31, when Pilate said unto them, take him away and judge him according to your law, nomos, your law, the Jews said, it's not lawful for us to do it. Now that again is Mosaic law. The last one, John 19:7. The Jews answered him, we have a law, nomos, and by our law he ought to die because he made himself son of God. So this is all Mosaic law, 10 Commandments, or Old Testament prophets. Okay, that's what he used. So contextually, when he used the words nomos, it's meaning Mosaic law, or it's referring to prophetic, the prophets' writings. So I said, now contextually, it's plain to see when John uses nomos, it's referring to Mosaic law, and at other times, it's referring to Old Testament prophets. So I'll ask you again, if John was writing to the church in Revelation 12:14, and if he said that what they were going to be doing was obeying the Mosaic law, which is what he's saying, many Adventists are saying Revelation 14:12 is pointing to the 10 Commandments. Why then didn't John use the word nomos, where you can clearly see here that when he's using the word nomos, he's pointing back to either Mosaic law or the Old Testament prophets, but he didn't use that word nomos. What word did he use? He used the word entole. And then it hit me. I said, but wait, there's more. Let's look at how John did use the word "entole." In the Gospel of John, here are how he uses the word "entole." John 10:18. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down. I have power to take it up again. This commandment, "entole," I've received from my Father. Is there anything in there that sounds like Mosaic law or Old Testament to you? Not to me. John 11:57. Now both the chief priests and the Pharisees had given a commandment "entole," that if any man knew where he was, he should show it, and that they might take him. Does that sound like Mosaic law to you? Old Testament law to you? John 12:49 and 50. For I have not spoken of myself, but the Father has sent me, and he gave me a commandment "entole," that I should say, and what I should speak. And I know that his commandment "entole" is life everlasting. Whosoever I speak, therefore, even as the Father said unto me, so I speak. Mosaic law? That sound like Mosaic law contextually? And now, John 12:34. A new commandment "entole" I give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, and you also love one another. That just screams Mosaic law, doesn't it? That's clearly the prophets. John 14:21. He that hath my commandments "entole," and keepeth them, he it is that loveth me. And he that loveth me shall be loved by my Father, and I will love him and will manifest himself. And so it's at this point right here that the Adventist jumps in and goes, aha, he that has my commandments and keeps them. And this is where I tell you, it's insulting, I know, but it's like something's wrong in their brain, that they take the word "commandment," the English word, and go, but it's the 10 commandments. No, you must look at the context. And nowhere prior to this has John used the word "entole" to mean 10 commandments. It's all been like an order. God gave Jesus an order. The Pharisees gave their people an order. That's the use of the word "entole," not Mosaic law. John 15:10, one of their favorites. If ye keep my commandments "entole," ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments "entole," and abide in his love. Nonsense. Jesus said, the Father gave me a commandment and I've kept it. That's what he's keeping here. That's what he's keeping in here. The Father tells me something, I do it. He gives me an order and I do it. John 15:12. Here we go. John 15:12. This is my commandment "entole," that ye love one another as I have loved you. So you tell me, when John uses so this is what the Adventists would have you believe. In Revelation 14:12, when he says they'll keep the commandments of God, for the first time ever in all of John's writings, he's going to use the word "entole" to actually point to the 10 commandments. Has he ever done it before? No, never has he ever done it before. Contextually, every other instance is to point to general commands, but this one time. So if the Adventist who is listening to this, you tell me, John chose the words himself. He was inspired by God. So as he was writing it, he chose to say the church that will be there in existence, the church that's in sight in Revelation 14:12. When it says they'll keep the commandments, he used the word "entole." He did not use nomos. Why is that? The answer is you don't have one. You do not have an answer to this question. Because, and this is the part that ultimately that kills me to the Adventist. I'll tell you exactly why you interpret it as commandments. I'll tell you exactly why. You know why? It's actually, it's not it is a her. Because Ellen White told you that's what it's going to be. And if you're an Adventist and if you're listening to me right now, I hope you hear the seriousness in my voice. Let me tell you why I cannot be an Adventist. Let me tell you why. I have to believe in Christ. For me to be saved, I have to have faith in Christ. And let's be honest, sometimes that right there is hard enough. But to be an Adventist, you have to have faith in Christ. And you also have to have faith in Ellen White. Because all of her interpretations, because if you want to know, why does the Adventist believe what they believe? They believe what they believe because of Mrs. White. Okay? She tells them what these verses mean. She interprets the book of Daniel. She interprets the book of Revelation for them. And they're going to tell you in your face all day long, that's not true. Mrs. White is not the final authority on biblical interpretation, to which I always ask the same question time and time again. If that is true, if it's true that she is not the final authority, then you should be able to show me at least one doctrine. You should be able to show me at least one doctrine that disagrees with her and her writings. If it's true that she's not the final authority, you should be able to show me at least one scriptural interpretation that is different than hers that the church upholds. And the answer is not going to happen. This whole thing about Entole and Nomos, listen, guys, for you and I, it's very, very clear to us. We can understand why. When we read, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments, we know what that means. As God speaks to our hearts and our minds, as the Spirit guides us, those are commandments. It's not this thing etched in stone anymore. But for the Adventists, man, they have their eyes are blinded. Satan has them right where he wants them. And so I'll go back to that thing. I've said this a million times. Any Adventist who's watching this video right now, nothing I say is going to make any difference to you unless God himself intervenes. Unless God himself comes into your heart and he can remove the scales and he can open your deaf ears. I don't care what argument I give you. It's not going to make a difference in the world until God prepares your heart to hear the absolute truth. So that's my prayer tonight. That's my prayer tonight, that that God would allow you to hear the truth. Until then, all I can do is present to you the logical, biblical argument that I presented tonight. Explain to me why Revelation 14:12 is pointing to the Mosaic when John never used that term in that capacity. And the answer is, as the Adventist, you believe it because of Ellen White, not because of the Bible. And that fact right there should make you toss and turn tonight. You should toss and turn. Like, why do I believe that she's saying that we'll keep the 10 commandments? But John clearly never used that term in that way before. Why do I believe it? You need to figure that out. Why do you believe it? Well, that's all I have for tonight. I will be back soon, I promise. And we're going to continue our conversation on the book of Galatians. I want to say thank you guys for following, for subscribing. Thank you for your kind words of support. I appreciate all the dialogue and the comments you guys put on these videos. It really means a lot. I greatly appreciate it. But with that, I'm going to tell you guys, God bless you. Please keep me in your prayers. Keep your Adventist friends and family in your prayers. They certainly need it. We all need it. So thank you. I hope this has been a blessing to you guys, and I'll see you next time. All right. Take care.